You know, a common question from senior leaders or senior pastors or lead pastors, whatever your paradigm is at your ministry, that I get quite a bit is, I really want to go multi-site, but I've got some people within the ministry that may not be really supportive. How do I get my board or my leadership team or my executive team or even some of the church members, how do I get them on board with the multi-site strategy? And my response is very similar to many that you hear in ministry, but it's vision, vision, vision. It comes from the visionary. It's got to be birthed within them. But it's so critical to get everybody on board. I love to shoot as a personal hobby. My wife and I like to shoot. We love to go to the range. It's very similar to firing a bullet versus a shotgun. A shotgun just does a massive amount of damage within a radius. It's a burst, and what creates that burst is the friction that comes as that shotgun shell moves through the air. It separates those particles. But then you go to a more strategic or precise weapon, a nice handgun or a nice firearm that shoots precision bullet, etc., and it moves very, very strategically towards a target at a longer range. And I think that the vision being communicated from the visionary is much like that. But you've got to get everybody on board, because we really want to be like that bullet versus the shotgun. We don't want to see friction separating the particles of the vision. We want to be like that bullet that is moving towards that target in a very strategic way, and it's got a long range trajectory. You want to be like that bullet, and that really comes from the heart of the visionary. So the first thing you've got to consider to make sure it's a bullet and not a shotgun is vision, vision, vision. It's got to be clearly defined from the leader, because you'll find this as leaders. Most of the time, if you're an effective vision caster, the ministry and the money and the movement follows behind that vision, as long as it's clearly communicated with energy, enthusiasm. So it's got to be birthed in the vision of you as a leader. The second thing that you really need to do is, once you've defined that vision, is you got to develop a communication strategy. How are you going to roll this out to your executive or your leadership team or your board? And then how are you going to roll it out to your staff? And then how are you going to roll it out to your congregants, to the people within your ministry? Develop a really clear communication strategy with specific timelines and points and different things like that. I've worked with many ministries on things just like this. Love to help ministries figure that piece out, but develop a communication strategy. It's got to come from you as a primary leader, and then it's got to go through the organization. The next thing that you need to think about is that you as the leader have to be the primary communicator. You have to champion this message publicly. This gives you leadership buy-in. It's critical. The primary communicator has got to talk about it from the platform, from their Facebook, from their Twitter, if they're blogging, if you're in a chat room, or you've got a communication piece that goes out to your church on a weekly or a monthly basis. As you begin to explore multi-site, you allow that to come through all of your public communication channels as the leader. This will give ultimate leadership buy-in. And then you move from that point into educating your staff. The third piece is to educate the staff. Staff buy-in is critical in moving to a multi-site culture and a multi-site strategy as a ministry. You really got to enlist those champions. You've got to figure out a way to get them engaged and involved. One of the ways that you can do it is, as you begin to consider what you're going to duplicate as a multi-site ministry, involve your key leaders within your departments and ask them, what are the things that are important to you in what you do that we need to duplicate? Now, you'll get a variety of answers here, and you may not want to duplicate them all, but what it will do is involve your team in the process, because if you don't, you'll start to get a varying amount of opinions, and nobody's going to be excited about it. And I believe that people are down on what they're not up on. You've got to fill them in. You've got to keep them informed. You've got to get that staff buy-in to enlist those champions and those thoroughbreds that are on your team. Now, once you've enlisted your staff and your team, well, then you've got to leverage the ministry channels within the ministry. In other words, take your small groups, your generational ministries, your men's ministries, your women's ministries, those ministries that are the key touch points within your organization, and leverage those as communication pieces. It's really allowing the concept of multi-site to bleed throughout your culture. It can't just be an idea that gets tossed out. It's really got to become a new ingrained part of your DNA and what makes you unique as a ministry. And so you do that through the staff buy-in, and then through your ministry leaders. You involve them in the process, call a special meeting, cast the vision to them yourselves. You know, get an opportunity to get all those leaders together, show them how effective it's going to be. You know, put that big vision out in front of them. Your staff is bought in, so they'll begin to bleed through them. And now it just becomes a part of the way that you do ministry. And it takes some strategic ways of implementing that, but getting the ministry buy-in is critical. And then the next thing that you need to do is launch a ministry-wide or an enterprise-wide campaign. You know, I remember when we launched the first campus at the Rock Church in San Diego, we were trying to figure out a way to take 10 to 12,000 people at the time and get them to understand what Multisite was and why we wanted to do it and why it was so important and that they had to be involved. And so I came up with this idea. I realized that our hospitality team were a bunch of walking billboards on every weekend experience. You know, we had 5 services on a Sunday, and these are the people that are greeting people, they're walking people to their seats, they're saying hello when you walk in. And so we made a very simple t-shirt, and basically it had the new campus, the campus location on it, the website, and the launch date. And we just made it simple. Everybody wore it. We had several hundred people wearing it for several weeks in a row as they greeted people and they walked into their seats. It was just a simple way to communicate a global message consistently to all the people that came in our doors. So, you know, getting the congregation involved through subtle ways of communicating and branding and advertising, whether it's through your video channels or whatever the case might be, it's humanly possible. You've got to get the buy-in from the congregation, because really, once you have established the buy-in from your leadership team, your executive team, or your board, then it moves into your staff. Your staff gets bought in, they become messengers, and that goes into your ministry leadership and begins to go through the bloodline of your church. And then you communicate to the whole body as soon as possible. You get that buy-in, and then they will become the true messengers of your multi-site model, and it will become contagious, and everybody will want to be a part.